It is an important book. Oh my God. I don't know if you could hear it. There are kids, like, we live on a hill, and there are kids riding their bikes down the hill really fast, and I just keep seeing them out of the corner of my eye, just zooming past the window. Hello, and welcome back to my channel. My name is Jamie, and today I am doing a summer reading wrap up. I didn't read a lot in June, so I was going to make it like a June and July wrap up, and then I got really frustrated trying to film that because I kept rambling on about a lot of books that I didn't have any thoughts on. Because unfortunately, as much as I hate doing this, I have gotten into the habit of just putting on an audiobook and listening to it while I do something else, and then not really engaging with the story, just kind of following along. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. I do not like passively reading. I love actively engaging with a story and like the themes, the characters, the world building, all of that, critiquing. Like, actually reviewing is a fun pastime for me. Unfortunately, the joy of reading has not been the same for some reason this summer. I've just kind of been turning my brain off. I don't know. I don't know why I've turned into this kind of reader. So I decided to just kind of take a break, regroup, try and film it again. And then all of a sudden it was August 31st. So I'm putting it all together. What I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce each book that I read, but there were a lot of books that I really have no thoughts on. I have like no review. They passed the time. That's all I can say. So I'll let you know a book like that, and then I'll actually talk about critiques that I have for books that I actually cared about. That might sound a little harsh, but that's where I'm at right now. I've tried doing this for like 30 minutes now, and my head already hurts from this bandana. I reread the Hunger Games trilogy in preparation for reading Sunrise on the Reaping. I'm not a huge Hunger Games fan. I appreciate the story. It's a really well built, well told story. And I appreciate and acknowledge the impact it has left on our culture, in literature and like society. It was really a cultural zeitgeist. I don't know if I'm using that word correctly, but I think I am. So this was the first time I had reread the books since I was like 13. I've watched the movies a lot since then, but I haven't reread the actual books. Yeah, since middle school. Wow, that's wild. I remembered the first book pretty accurately, and I remembered all the big plot points of Catching Fire. But Mockingjay, I don't know why. I think that entire book just left my brain as soon as I finished it. And I'm pretty sure I read it on my 8th grade DC trip. So I don't know. It was like gone because there were so many parts of that where I was like, oh, that happened? That was a part of it? I don't remember this at all. What happened? What? I don't know why it just like didn't stay with me that she brings up her father all the time, like almost more than her mother, and her father's teachings, like how to hunt, how to swim, like how to, like all of that, were the only reason she stayed alive. And those were my two thoughts on that. It's just I forgot all of Mockingjay and I forgot her father as a character. Next is The Clementine Complex by Bob Mortimer. Um, First of all, this is actually called the Satsuma Complex, but in America, Satsumas are called clementines. So I picked up this because I saw the book at a store and I thought it was cute. So I went to read the audiobook, and the audiobook is narrated by the author, which is really cool. I love when they do that. But they didn't change the actual text. So in the actual text, it's just called the Satsuma Complex, not the Clementine Complex, which is just a little bit confusing. Just a little bit confusing, but whatever. So in this book, our main character is a silly, goofy guy with a pretty normal life, and he goes to meet not really a friend, but some guy he knows from work at a bar. I don't know. It's been a while since I've listened to this. The friend has to leave early, so then our main character strikes up a conversation with a girl at the bar reading a book called The Satsuma Complex. And he really hits it off with this girl and wants to ask her out, but she leaves before he can, leaving the book behind. And so he tries to find her and return her book. And then he also finds out that that friend he was meeting is found dead the next morning, and he's like the last person to see him alive. And so now it turns into this weird espionage, like mob story. Our main character keeps narrating animals talking to him and saying like really silly things. And let me explain a scene that really stuck out to me that kind of, I think, encompasses the humor of this book. So this guy is stuck in his car. I don't remember why he's there, but he really has to pee. So he finds an empty bottle in his car and then pees in the bottle. And once he's finished doing that, somebody else knocks on his window and they start talking. And that person is like, hey, what are you drinking? It looks like one of those weird health drinks, like those ginger, you know, immunity shots or whatever. And so the main character is like, oh, yes, it is one of those health drinks and it's really good. You should have a sip, and starts to give it to him. And then right before the other person is about to drink it, he goes, actually, don't do that. You won't like it, and takes it back. And then once the other person leaves, he's thinking to himself, like, why did I almost let him drink my piss? That, I think, encompasses the humor of this story. Apparently, Bob Mortimer is like a well known British comedian. I've never heard of him, but the book was really fun to read. Something I will mention is that we do eventually get that girl's POV because he's been hunting her down. Hunting's probably not the best word for that. But, you know, this guy's narration is really, really silly and, you know, talking about absurdist things. And then we get the girl's narration and it's very somber. And all of a sudden, it's a very big tonal shift where she's talking about like being afraid of her partner and not being able to leave. So just kind of keep that in mind that it's not all sunshine and rainbows. We do talk about like domestic abuse and abusive partners. I don't know. Just something to think about. Next, I read Bad Gays, A Homosexual History by Ben Miller and Hua Lemi. I hope I'm saying that right. This is a nonfiction book, and as you can tell, it is about gay people. It's about homosexual history. When it comes to nonfiction, I really enjoy memoirs. I have a really hard time with like journalistic or textbook nonfiction. And this was almost like a textbook, like a resource or a reference book. Apparently Bad Gays is also a podcast, and this is a book released about this podcast or like from the people who made the podcast. So maybe the podcast would be an easier thing to digest for me. To me, this book was really just each chapter introducing a new historical figure, explaining what they did in their life, whether it was positively or negatively influential, and then giving a lot of resources or proof that they were most likely queer in some way. But a lot of times that proof was just kind of hearsay or gossip. These people lived in a time where being queer was like a death sentence. So obviously they couldn't write or confess to anybody like I'm a homosexual. So the only proof that they could have been homosexuals or trans or whatever is like other people saying, hey, I think that person's a homosexual. So like, to be fair, this hearsay or gossip is the only proof that we have. We're following multiple different people in multiple historical time periods, and it's just kind of difficult to keep track of everything, especially when you're listening to an audiobook and especially when you're doing other things. I do see the importance of this, of showing off that queer people existed in history, and it's also not always like good representation. Like some of these people were really bad and they were also queer, because being queer is human. Anyway, that's kind of like all that the book is doing, and for me it was hard to keep track of. But for people who enjoy nonfiction, it would probably be really easy for them to read. I read Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck, and the only thing I have to say about this one, it's a classic for a reason. Read it or don't, I don't care. We were going to like an outside jazz concert, and I thought it'd be really cool and like mysterious of me to have a book, like a classic book, to read while I was listening to jazz. So I brought that book only because it fit in my bag. And so then I was on a rooftop bar and I was reading it while listening to jazz, and I turn around and the TV at the bar is playing the Of Mice and Men movie. I thought that was the coolest coincidence ever. My fiance did not care at all. He was like, it's whatever, like, it does not matter. But I thought it was really cool. And that's all I have to say about that. Next is But Not Too Bold by Hache Puello. I will preface this by saying I did not realize it was a translated text until the very end. This is a very short novella that is considered a sapphic monster romance, horror romance. And I think it really fails in its storytelling. Now, some of that could be because while I was reading it, I was like, wow, this writing style is really stiff and like does not flow very well, doesn't really even make sense in some places. And then it wasn't until the very end that I realized it was translated. So there may have been some things that were lost in translation, didn't flow as well as it would have in Portuguese, because this is, I believe, a Brazilian, yeah, this is a Brazilian author. In this world, there are monsters called archaic ones, which is really cool. These monsters take many forms. They're like worm monsters, there's like arm monsters. Our main monster is a spider esque lady. Kind of the way I imagined her was the spider other mother from Coraline. Sorry, Neil Gaiman reference. I'm so sorry, but like that's all I could imagine. Our main character was raised to eventually become what is called the Keeper of the Keys, which is like the right hand of this spider monster. Her previous Keeper of the Keys was just eaten because she was accused of stealing something very important to the spider monster. It's a very, very short novella, and I do think that both love interests, because there are two love interests, both love interests kind of come out of nowhere. Because you go into it knowing it's a monster romance, you very quickly see that they're trying to sympathize with the monster, even though she's like eating everybody. And like, okay, whatever, I get it. We know that it's advertised as a sapphic monster romance. The monster lady is going to be sympathetic and have some sort of romantic interest. There is another person, I think it comes out of nowhere, and I don't think it's built enough for either of them for it to really be believable that our main character was interested in either love interest. Like the monster one makes a bit more sense, the other person makes no sense at all. I think the glimpses at world building that we have are really interesting, but when you have a novella, you really have all of these limitations, and you need to make sure those limitations work in your favor. And I don't think that this novella worked in our author's favor. That's all I'm going to say about that. Don't Let the Forest In was a big disappointment because I loved the first 80%, 85-ish percent of this book, and then it just did the worst thing it could possibly do. And I'm going to try and explain the story first and then get into the spoilers on why I didn't like it. So I'll give timestamps for that. So we are set at a dark academia, rich kid boarding school. And our main character is a boy named Andrew who has two best friends, his twin sister Dove and Thomas. And they've been best friends since they were like 12. They've been a whole little trio, inseparable. And Andrew, unfortunately, has kind of an almost obsessive codependency, specifically for Thomas, but also for Dove, his twin sister. Before the start of the story, I believe, it's been a while since I read it, but I believe Andrew tried confessing his feelings for Thomas. And then over the summer, both Thomas and his twin sister Dove have given him the cold shoulder. They've like not talked to him the entire summer. Thomas at the beginning of the school year is like fully ignoring him. They get into a lot of fights. They're roommates, so it's like really hard to not see each other. And even then, they're like not talking. And Dove is just kind of hiding from Andrew, and he cannot understand why. Now, he thinks it's because Thomas and Dove have like a thing, and he gets really upset about it because, like, even if he has feelings for Thomas, he would expect his sister and his best friend to like be honest about them dating. And so finally he just follows Thomas out to the forest to try and catch him making out with Dove or whatever. And then he gets like attacked by a monster. Turns out there's this whole paranormal thing that's been going on, and the reason Thomas has been so distant is because he's like fighting monsters in the forest and trying to keep Andrew and Dove safe. Anyway, Andrew and Thomas work together to fight these monsters and try and stop them, try and figure out why they're being attacked and whatnot. Throughout the entire story, we see Andrew's anxiety just get worse and worse over various things, but one of them being his feelings for Thomas, which is really relatable, especially when you are closeted. But also, he's not feeling like sexual desire, so he's trying to figure that out. And also, like, what's going on with Dove? Why is she just kind of ignoring both of them? It's a whole thing. And it was really, really great. I loved the pacing. I loved the atmosphere. I loved the characterization. I loved the exploration of like panic attacks and monsters kind of being a representation of that. We get to the very end. And this is where the book lost me. So, spoilers from here on out. There's nothing worse than a fake out reveal. Okay, a fake out death, a fake out reveal. It always feels like the author is just intentionally lying to the reader because they couldn't think of a better twist. I don't know. I hate a fake out. Very few books have done a fake out reveal in an inspiring and interesting way that actually makes sense. So just keep that in mind. Another trope I hate with every fiber of my being is this person was actually a hallucination. Now, there's a difference between a hallucination and a ghost. I think if a person is a ghost and like somebody doesn't know they're a ghost, that's cool. I don't know why there's a difference to me, but there is, okay? And you guys are just going to have to accept that. So we get to a point where Andrew understands more about the monsters, and he's in the forest, and he finds his twin sister Dove, and he's talking to her, and he's like, we've got to put the monsters to rest. Like, it's my fault. Like, you have to help us. Me and Thomas, we've been fighting these monsters, but like we need to figure out how to like put an end to them in the first place. And Dove stops him and goes, you couldn't possibly have been working with Thomas. Thomas got arrested at the beginning of the school year. He hasn't been here the entire time. What are you talking about, Andrew? So then Andrew starts freaking out, and he's like, no, like we've had all of these moments together. Like, he's been here. I know he's been here. What are you talking? I couldn't have hallucinated him. And Andrew's panicking because he has like a panic disorder and a horrible anxiety. And so he's like, am I just insane? And I've just been imagining Thomas the entire time. So as I'm listening to this, I'm like, oh my God, I can't believe we're doing this person hallucinated their friend the entire time and he wasn't actually there. I cannot believe we're doing that twist reveal because that's horrible and such lazy writing. And as I'm listening to this, I'm like, no, this is going to be a fake out. That isn't the real Dove. That's going to be a monster trying to get in Andrew's head. And I was like, that would actually be a cool fake out. Okay. That would be a reason a fake out would work. Okay. So then Andrew runs and finds Thomas. And this happens immediately after. This isn't like a lot of suspension, a lot of tension as we're like questioning reality and our sanity. Okay. This happens immediately after. He finds Thomas. And he's telling Thomas, I need to know you're real. Please tell me you're real. Dove was just telling me you're not real, but I couldn't have just hallucinated you the entire year, right? Thomas stops Andrew and goes, what are you talking about? You could not possibly have been talking to Dove. Dove's dead. And then we get a flashback from like 5 months ago where we find out that Dove's been dead the entire time. And like Andrew just blocked her death out and has just been hallucinating her the entire story. And I almost stopped reading the book. I honestly stopped caring about the book at that moment. I was like, okay, you set up this, it was all a hallucination that didn't make any sense. And you made it impossible to believe. And then immediately after, you do the exact same twist? That's almost impossible to believe? I'm sorry. I can suspend my disbelief for monsters that kill teachers in the school, and I can suspend my disbelief for like ghosts haunting you throughout your entire like summer or whatever. But I cannot believe that someone would block out the death of their loved one and then hallucinate them the entire school year. It doesn't make sense. No. That's too far for me. I cannot. I legitimately stopped caring about the book. I cannot tell you a single thing that happened after that twist reveal. Thomas blamed himself, I guess. I don't know. It just doesn't make sense. I didn't like it. I didn't like that ending. I thought it was dumb. I will, I think, read other books by the author. The author has like a lot of books, which just based on their craft of writing, I think I will enjoy because I enjoyed the act of reading this story. But if they're doing that kind of twist reveal shit in another book, next I read Darkly by Marisha Pessl. This is in the same vein as like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory or Ready Player One, where there is a legendary person, like a person who has created the most amazing thing in their field, and they have either died or they've gone into hiding or something has happened. There's a lot of mystery around them, involving them, a lot of mystery on who they really were, if they were actually doing what they were doing, and there's like a cult following for their work. So in this book, at the very beginning, there is an invite for an internship to work at the company for Louisiana Veda's board game company called Darkly. She makes these Darkly games. I don't remember why they're called Darkly. Louisiana Veda is this mythic, legendary figure, and she makes these board games that are just impossible to win. They're like trivia puzzle board games. It's been a while since I've read it, but also I wasn't paying attention, so I don't remember exactly how they're really hard to understand, but they're like known for being impossible to figure out, these puzzle based board games, right? So there's an internship and our main character applies almost by accident. Like she didn't actually mean to send in her application, and she gets selected alongside a handful of other people. And I will give props to the narrator. All of these other characters are supposed to be from other countries, and the narrator does their accents really well. There's like a French accent, like a German one. I don't remember the other people. And I don't know if they're good accents, but she does them consistently, which is really good. And props to the narrator for being able to do that. So our main character, along with these other like handful of teens, go to the Darkly place in London and find out that they're not there to work as interns, but in fact, an unreleased Darkly game has been stolen and has people like playing it. But because people are playing it, kids are getting kidnapped and going missing. And so this is a big PR nightmare. And they want the kids, the teenagers, to play the game and find out who stole it. It doesn't really make sense. Also, I will note that the Darkly game that was stolen is not a board game. They like call a burner phone, invite you to play, kidnap you, and then put you in like an escape room, like an intense escape room. You do have to suspend your disbelief, as you do with all YA books. You have this group of characters trying to figure out like how it got stolen, how to play it, how it connects with Louisiana Veda's mysterious life. And it was really, really interesting as like a mystery thriller book. I will say the very end of it was very much like a to be continued in book 2 kind of ending, where our group of characters literally sit down and talk about all of the questions they don't have answers to yet. So yeah, that's how the book ends. And I think that's a bit more common for YA books in order to like bait the reader into wanting the sequel. But I didn't appreciate it. So there's that. Also, it was very confusing how this was a board game but wasn't a board game. Next, I read Remarkably Bright Creatures by Shelby Van Pelt. I read this for a book club, didn't end up going to the book club. It is one of the like more famous books of the summer in the last couple of years. It's about a couple different characters and their lives and how their lives intertwine, and an octopus. They obviously make the octopus like a very intelligent, clever gentleman. His POV is very silly because it's like these are the thoughts of an octopus and he's judging like the crabs and stuff in the tank next to him. So that's really silly and very fun to engage with. The rest of the book was just kind of like a feel good lit fic. Like these characters have a tough life, but then they all have a happy ending at the very end. And that's great. And if that's what you want to read, it's a great book for that. I'm not a feel good lit fic kind of person. I'm a devastate me lit fic kind of person. So yeah, that was my experience with that. Then I read Sunrise on the Reaping, and I actually didn't enjoy it as much as I thought I would. If you've been living under a rock, this is Haymitch's Hunger Games prequel. This is the 50th Quarter Quell, where 4 tributes were selected rather than just the normal 2. So we have a big, large cast, and we learn more about Haymitch's perspective in his games. Now, as noted by a lot of people in their reviews, especially before the book came out, we already know what happens in Haymitch's games. Like, we saw the highlights of it. We know he wins, obviously, and we know how certain people die. So the book was more about the things surrounding his Hunger Games rather than just his Hunger Games. We talk a lot about propaganda, which is great, and like fashion, how fashion and they keep calling it posters. I don't remember why they call them posters, but like the way you're viewed, how that is used against or for you, which I thought was really great. We always saw fashion as a weapon in a rebellion with like Cinna and Katniss's Hunger Games fashion, but like this goes a little bit more into it, which I thought was really interesting. I do appreciate that even with a really big ensemble cast, Suzanne Collins was able to get you to care for a lot of characters, even if they have a very small role. Also, these weren't just like rehashes of characters we've already seen. You have like an innocent young character and you're like, maybe that's going to be another Rue, but it wasn't. She had a completely different role in the story. And like, I really enjoyed Maisie Lee's character being kind of seen as snobby and a bully because of her class and rank, being a big ally and seeing the importance of working together. Really great story. My big thing is that I do not appreciate Haymitch being Katniss's parents' best friends. So we find out that Katniss's parents, Burdock and Astrid, they are given names finally, were best friends with Haymitch. Well, at least Burdock was. We also see how they stop being friends once Haymitch has won the games. We learn from Katniss's point of view that Haymitch put stock in just her. He chose her to win and to survive over Peeta. He doesn't give Peeta any help in the arena. He doesn't give Peeta any of the gifts from sponsors. He only puts stock in Katniss. Now, when you read it in the Hunger Games trilogy, it's because, at least to Katniss's point of view, he believed she had a fighting chance. Her survival skills, her weapon skills, all of these things were reasons she was able to win, and that's why he chose her to support in the games and not Peeta. And it's a big sticking point for Katniss and Haymitch, especially in Catching Fire when they go back into the games. But once you make Haymitch her father's former best friend, to me, it just feels like Haymitch was doing that out of some familial obligation. Like, that's my best friend's daughter, and even though I failed my best friend, I can help protect his daughter in these games, rather than it being Katniss's own skills that impress him. It kind of changes how Haymitch views Katniss in her games. But anyway, I digress. Next, I read The Island of Sea Women by Lisa See, which is set in the island of Jeju in Korea during World War II into the Korean War. I forget the word for it, but it's sea divers. Jeju is known for having these all-women sea divers, and before they used to dive for like fish and clams and all of these things. And now it's more of a tourist thing. This book specifically kind of follows almost all historical fiction, specifically female-led historical fiction storylines, almost beat for beat, where it's like the friends meet at some point when they are kids, and then there's some traumatic event uh, for them when they're very young, and it kind of bonds them together, and then they grow up and you see a montage of events as they grow up, and then eventually they are just marrying age, and one or both of them gets married to a very abusive person, and then you watch them have children. Usually there is some sort of child loss, and then they have some sort of cataclysmic friendship fight that keeps them from being friends, and then they reunite when they're older. And for whatever reason, that's a very common like storyline for historical fiction. I feel like I read that all the time. Something this brings to the table is actually discussing the view of gender on the island of Jeju, because like they live in a time, and you still see this, where women are supposed to be dainty and small, and they don't work, and they're pale because they don't work, and they have soft hands, and they're very feminine. And obviously on the island of Jeju, the women work, and they work out in the sun, and they're very muscular, and so there's this big discussion and view of women being very manly, very masculine, and how they're stronger than normal women. It's just a really great understanding of like gender and femininity on an island where it is the norm for women to work versus where women don't work. I thought that was very interesting. It's been a while since I've read it, so I don't remember a lot. And it was sad. So yeah, that's all I really had to say. Next, I read House of Cotton, which surprisingly was set in Knoxville. I didn't know that when I picked it up, but it is set in like modern day Knoxville. So it was really cool to be like, hey, I've been there. Hey, they're talking about the mall. I go to that mall. Oh my God, I've been to that park. Oh my gosh, I know that street. The story of this book is a young girl named Magnolia, or Maggie, has just lost her grandmother, who was the person who was taking care of her, the house that she lived in. And her grandmother rents from a really disgusting, gross man. That man uses Magnolia's financial distress to assault her, as a way to like let her stay in the house. She's just kind of in a desperate situation, has just been in a very traumatizing situation while also grieving the loss of a loved one. And all of a sudden, this white man comes in and is like, you could be a model for me. And so she goes to this random man's place of work and is like, you said I could be a model. Now this man is actually a funeral director, and the model job was not like modeling for even like caskets or anything, but in fact there's some sort of paranormal situation where he is clairvoyant, and he has people pay him so that they can talk to their loved ones, their deceased loved ones, and Maggie is channeling those loved ones, and that's what the modeling job is. Really weird, fucked up situation where she's living with these people who are exploiting her by exploiting grieving families, saying that she's channeling them, and she kind of is, she kind of isn't. It's really weird. And then on top of that, she's got this whole situation with like her grandmother coming to visit her in her dreams. And on top of all of that, there's like this weird sex stuff that's happening. And in fact, I was talking to a friend about this book, and he was like, oh, I might read that because it's set in Knoxville. And I was like, wait. Before you read it, you should know there's some like weird sex stuff. And he was like, what do you mean weird sex stuff? And I was like, well, for example, the male lead, that she has a will they won't they kind of situation with, he's a funeral director, and when he was younger he was caught touching himself next to a corpse, and then during their sex scenes it kind of seems like he's into that. I was really afraid throughout the entire book that we were going to get full on necrophilia. We do not, but it is very much implied. So be careful. If you don't like weird horror sex stuff and you do not want anything close to or reminiscent of necrophilia, do not look into this book. I don't know. It was weird. It's horror, and it wasn't a particularly well done horror in my opinion. The novelty of it being set in Knoxville wore off very quickly. I didn't enjoy reading it. What's the next book I read? Oh, The Cloisters. All I really want to say about The Cloisters is that it wants to be The Secret History so bad. The Cloisters follows a girl named Anne, and she got an internship or like a grad program to the Met studying Renaissance, medieval history, something like that, and then was fired that same day. Not because of anything she did, but they forgot to tell her that they actually couldn't hire her or something. And then the guy who's in charge of something called the Cloisters finds her and is like, well, she could do something that I need, and she'll just work at the Cloisters. The Cloisters is a smaller museum specifically for medieval. Yes. No. Medieval? Yeah, medieval art and divination. So it's like not exactly what she wanted to do, but it's a job. It's New York. It's in her fields, sort of, I guess. Anyway, they are trying to study and prep for a divination specific exhibit, and they're trying to prove that tarot cards were not just like an 1800s like parlor game, but actually were real divination tools used in the medieval era. And there's like murder, there's weird stuff, there's obsessive characters, there are people having really toxic relationships. This has a really weird twist. I don't know if I want to spoil it. This falls into the same kind of trap that unfortunately a lot of mystery thrillers fall into for me, where, hi, Dr. Pepper. Oh, he just sat down in my lap. That's so cute. You know, there's like weird things going on. There's murder. Obviously, one of the characters murdered somebody else. Like that, I can understand. But then it gets into like cartoonish monologuing villain stuff. And it's like, I don't know. I don't I don't know. It just gets really silly. Oh, you really want me to believe that this character did all of that? I don't know. I don't know if I believe that. Do not do that. That was my impression of the Cloisters. It was very atmospheric. You're gonna knock over my camera. Stop it. It was enjoyable. It passed the time. But then we get to that one spot where it's like, oh, okay, I guess. Whatever. So next I read Society of Lies by Lauren Ling Brown. This is set at Princeton and it follows two sisters. One of them is like 10 years older than the other, but we see them at different times in their lives. It's kind of confusing. Princeton, I guess, doesn't have Greek life. They have something called eating clubs, which is basically just a fraternity. There's this very exclusive eating club called the Sterling Club. Maya and Naomi both get invited to it in their respective timelines. And then underneath the Sterling Club, there's a secret society that kind of has fingers in everyone's pie kind of situation. We start the book with Maya coming back to Princeton for a reunion and also Naomi's graduation. Excuse me. Finding out that Naomi's body has been found dead in a lake. We get 3 different perspective chapters. We get Maya 10 years ago when she was in Princeton joining the Sterling Club. We get Naomi's point of view a few months leading up to her death. And then we get Maya in the present day trying to figure out what happened to Naomi. That's all I can really say without really getting into the weeds of it. And like I said, it's super complicated. This video already is super long. Last but not least was My Lady Jane by Brody Ashton, Jody Meadows, and Cynthia Hand. I didn't realize there were 3 authors. My Lady Jane is a re-envisioning of Tudor history, like Henry VIII, but like not him. It's the rest of the people. It's what's his name? Edward. Lady Jane Grey is a real historical figure that was Queen of England for like 9 days before she got executed because there was like a war for the crown. In this reimagining, we're set in a world where it's like Tudor England history with like Mary, Elizabeth, and Edward, and Lady Jane Grey and her husband. But we also live in a world where certain people just turn into animals. They have like animal forms. And these animals, these animal shifter people are persecuted, except everyone in the royal family is also an animal shifter. They're called Ethians. Our main character, Lady Jane Grey, gets arranged married to her husband. And this, I think, historically happened. She was arranged married to some guy. And it turns out that guy turns into a horse. You can see why I was interested in this book. Most Ethians can control their animal form, and when they change, this main guy cannot. He feels like he's cursed. And so he turns into a horse during the day and a man at night. Jane has some sort of issue with that, I guess. And while that's going on, the King of England, Edward, is almost assassinated. So he goes on the run, and then they're trying to fight for the crown. And that's kind of the theme, the story. And it goes off the rails. We get to the point where like Jane becomes Queen of England for 9 days, and then she gets sent to be executed. And then we get a note from the authors that are like, and that's what history wants you to know. But we have researched more than that and found the real history, the real story of Lady Jane and her husband and the King Edward and all of that. So it really goes off the rails there. This is very cutesy. It's very humorous. This was obviously like a tongue-in-cheek sort of YA book. Nothing's taken too seriously. I mean, obviously they're rewriting history, so like it doesn't really matter. I will say, kind of to exemplify how silly it is, we get to a very late point in the book where they're like taking down some guy. I don't even remember. And Jane ends up tying him up with rope. And the authors stop and say, to this day, we don't know where this rope came from. We know she didn't have the rope at the beginning of this chapter. We don't know where this rope came from. There's no historical record on where she got this rope. We've talked to rope experts. We've talked to historical. We've looked at all of the primary sources. We still don't know where this rope came from. And I think what that means is the authors realized at some point that Jane could not possibly have rope on her. And I don't remember why she couldn't have just found some rope lying around. So they pointed out that we don't know where this rope came from. And that's just kind of the tongue-in-cheek tone that we're going with. There's this like miscommunication trope between our 2 love interests because she thinks he's a scoundrel and he's hiding a secret, but the secret's actually really mundane and sweet. It's really silly, and I really enjoyed it. But it had also like annoyed me at certain places because it's like, come on, guys. For example, they talk about Jane, Lady Jane, being bookish like a million times. They're like, she likes books. She reads books. Her nose is in a book. They also talk about how she has red hair all the time. She's got such red hair. Oh my gosh. She's a redhead. She's got flaming red hair. And then also, like, the main villain has a big nose, and they exaggerate that so much for no reason. It's just super silly. And like to a certain degree it gets really annoying, but it's also like meant to be like annoyingly silly. I don't know. I enjoyed reading it, but it also has its like flaws. So just keep that in mind. I think I've been talking for like 3 hours. I don't know how long this video is. I'm sorry. I promise I will not do a 3-month book wrap up. And I know I rambled about a bunch of books even when I said I wouldn't. I'm so sorry. I guess I did have a lot of thoughts on these books. I'm getting real dizzy. That's going to be it for me. Bye.